Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone today to the Committee on Affordability, Accountability, and Planning. Today is September 25th, 2013. Please be advised that the meeting is being broadcast over the internet, so be prepared for that when we're making our comments. Agenda item 2 is consideration of approval of the minutes from the June 26th meeting on the committee. Do we have any questions and discussion on the minutes? I need a motion to approve the minutes. Move by approval for David and second by Chris. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is consideration of approval of the consent calendar. Do we have any questions or discussion about the consent calendar? David?
Were there any items that received comment that were on the consent calendar after the posting? And is there anyone that's planning on testifying from the audience or presentation from the staff?
No.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the consent calendar and add items D2 and D4, which received no comment.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second, Chris. All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda and add item D2 and D4, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. All right. Agenda item 4 is public testimony, and as we've already had stated, we do not have anyone registered to testify, so we'll go on to agenda item 5A. And agenda 5A is on the consent calendar. And so agenda item 5B is a discussion on facilities information for the committee's review. Susan Brown, the Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Accountability, is here for this discussion. So we'll hopefully have some nice feedback.
Okay. And as all of you are aware, SB 215 removed the board's authority to approve facilities projects. We still are supposed to be collecting all the same information, doing reports. The previous item listed those that were submitted for our information during this past quarter, since the last board meeting. And they all met standards. You will find at your place a page that looks like this. And this is kind of our proposal to provide you a little more information for any of the projects that do not meet all the standards. It's not that we will approve them or not approve them, but we will be sending information to the governor's office, the legislative budget board, both higher ed committees, that sort of thing. And so we wanted to provide them a little bit more information for those institutions, for those projects that don't meet standards and why they don't meet standards, that sort of thing. So this is just our first pass. So if there's something you would like to see other than that, or you think that would be important for the legislature to see other than this, let us know. And this is kind of where we're wanting to get feedback from you. So we have that as kind of part one of what we want to be able to provide you for those that don't meet standards. And then the other question was, as part of the SB 215, there was also, they removed the threshold. Right now, projects did not even come to us unless they reached a $4 million threshold. In the rewrite, all of it got removed, so they would be sending all projects. We have told them we really don't want to see every single one of your projects down to $1,000. So if you would, right now we've told them that we are assuming that we will keep the $4 million threshold. If y'all want to change that, now is a good time to do that, because we'll be bringing, based on the feedback we received today, we will be bringing rules forward for the December meeting, or maybe March, depending on the time frame, that we'll have to go through negotiated rulemaking. So, but we want to get y'all's feedback at this point. And so,
Mr. Chairman. Susan, how did we, from a historical perspective, how did we settle in on the $4 million to begin with?
I'm trying to remember how many years ago. Long time ago, it was at $1 million, and back way before my time, it was at $1 million. So that's been quite a few years. And then about 7 years ago, because of inflation, we kind of equated it, and we were getting a whole lot of little bitty projects and that sort of thing. So we bumped it up to the 4 million and put it at 4 million across the board. And that was at our recommendation, and it got put into statute that way. And so then when they did the rewrite of the statute, all of the thresholds were eliminated.
So if we maintained the $4 million level, that wouldn't, your staff would be able to handle that?
Yes, that would be fine. That's where we've been all along, so.
David?
So SB 215, I guess I'm looking for some legislative intent. So it removed our ability to enforce non-approval, not necessarily remove our ability to approve or disapprove. We can still approve and disapprove. It just has no teeth.
No.
No?
We review at this point.
So the word review is in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it prohibits us from making a comment that we don't approve of this.
We can say if it meets standards or does not meet standards.
Okay. And was it the intent that we share that information with the institution?
We must share that we share it with the institutions. We share it with the legislative committees and with with y'all, and then with the legislative committees.
The 2 higher ed committees?
2 higher ed committees, the LBB, and I believe the governor's office.
Okay. And help me understand, what was their reasoning why they would increase the amount of data dumped to us and then tell us you can only review?
They're not increasing the amount of data. This is all information that we have always been collecting, that we've been collecting. They made it very clear in the hearings that they want us to continue to collect the information. And they wanted to make sure that we still had reports, we still saw what was being built, but that we don't have the approval or disapproval authority.
Right, but they
anymore.
increased the data because they removed the threshold of the $4 million.
Yes.
So we're going to be in the minutia, in the weeds on smaller projects, at least according to the way the bill was written and passed.
Unless the coordinating board sets a threshold.
So, I mean, not that this was my decision or my preference, but there's other people down in the Pink Granite Building who made these decisions. Have we asked them what exactly they're looking for from us?
We have asked them, and okay, commissioners.
I mean, I'm looking for some legislative intent. I want to satisfy whatever it is that they want here, but I also don't want the staff chasing themselves around on small projects or creating reports that nobody wants to read or hear.
I think the legislative intent was to place the authority to make the decisions regarding facilities at the campus level and at the board level, and what they expected the role of the coordinating board to be was to work more closely with boards of regents, particularly to inform them about projects that meet our standards. And to comment to the boards about whether we're concerned about projects that regularly exceed our standards. They want us to confer with the boards about cost efficiency, about replication of efforts and so forth, so that they want us to still be attentive to facilities projects and how cost efficient they are, but they want the ultimate decision about whether to proceed with projects and how to plan for projects to be accomplished at the campus or system level. So one of the things that
I just want to clarify, it's really the system level. The system
Yes.
could choose to defer somewhat to the institution, but they really were emphasizing this. There's a reason for the systems, and they should be making these decisions.
And Chairman Heldenfels and I had spoken at some length about how we would deal with this, and one of the things that we intended to do was work more directly, more closely with boards to report to them more regularly about their facilities projects, and to express concern when we detected that there were a significant number of projects in a given system that didn't meet our standards, but that once again the decision-making authority would rest at the system level. They want us to be diligent
So it's my impression that the coordinating board staff has been doing that all along.
Right.
And in a shared decision-making process, the only time that you have any share of the decision is the ability to say, no, you can't proceed. So that's the part that's missing now. Now all we can do is say, I got a spotlight on you. You're not meeting the standard, but you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And that's sort of where we're at. And I'm concerned that the law of intended or unintended consequences may take place. We'll see. It may be a brilliant stroke to have done that, to take that authority away from the coordinating board. It may not be. But I would agree that we should set a threshold. If $4 million is the threshold, I'm fine with that. Pick a number. I mean, you know, there's only so much FTE here in this building that can be done, and I would concentrate on the really, really big numbers as opposed to the really small numbers. I don't think this is a bad grid, but I was talking to David Gardner earlier. You know, on item A, we had 11 institutions there. Maybe if there was a spreadsheet where you listed each standard or each criteria and the institution in the x-axis and the criteria, it could be checks, could be numbers, you know, met, not met.
Okay, all of the ones on 5A met all the standards.
Right. But I'm saying that if we saw a simple spreadsheet that had all of the institutions and all the standards they met, like you've done here, whatever the standards are,
Okay.
you know, but, you know, be creative. And it can be like this where everyone, but it ought to be something that at the end of the day, it's clear that they met all the standards and we have no concerns.
Okay.
Or
we can easily do that.
They have minor variations and there was a reason for that.
And we have not gotten any feedback yet from the legislative committees on what format they would like to see it in, or how often. We had proposed to them that we do it quarterly because, you know, right after the board meeting, then we would send them the projects. But so far, we have not heard what
I would think
what
that
they would like to see.
Yeah, if we had concerns that they were not meeting standard and they were proceeding without meeting the standard, we would report immediately. I would report in the opt-in as opposed to the opt-out. There's no reason to report other than quarterly or annually on all those that met all the standard. You can just give them a list of these 11 saying all these met the standard. We have no concerns. But as soon as an institution blows past that stop sign that we put up there that's a false stop sign because we can't stop them, then I think we have a duty to report to the people who control the purse strings in this state. And that's where I think we should be at opt-in. If they're not meeting the standard and they refuse to meet the standard and they continue to proceed with something that doesn't meet the standard and is not easily explained why it's not meeting the standard, I think we ought to have an immediate report to those individuals that lead the two higher ed committees, the governor's office and the LBB, and let them deal with it.
Okay.
That's clearly who's in charge now.
Right. And we don't even, it doesn't even ask us to report to them the ones that do meet standards. They don't even really want to see those. Only the ones that do not meet standards.
Chris?
Just so we're on, I'm sorry, because I know you covered this. Who are we reporting to if they don't meet? It's the regions, correct?
Well, it's the governor's, in the statute, it says we report to the governor's office, the LBB, and both higher ed committees.
Okay.
Now, we would be sending something back to the regions
Back to
as
the
a
region.
courtesy. Well, we're
Yeah.
sending something about their institution. We send it to the regions as well, just as
We would still have our
courtesy.
discussion with the regions and the institution leadership on an ongoing basis, but at some point in time, they're either going to ignore our concerns and go ahead and approve, or they're going to revise the format, right?
They will probably have already approved it before it comes to us for information purposes,
Right.
And
which is
that
what they
doesn't
do
sound
now.
like a good thing.
Right now, they have already approved it before it comes to the board, or in the past, before it came to the board for consideration. The Board of Regents had already approved it.
Are they using these same criteria when they look at their own before they approve? Are they giving this information to their regents?
Some of them are and some of them are not. That is up to each board will say what they want to look at and what they do not want to look at.
Well, I do think we have to recognize that whether we like it or not, and I don't have institutional knowledge, but the legislature sent us a message. I mean, it's not our approval anymore. So at some point, I think we're gathering data, and if it doesn't happen, we're reporting it. But by the time we report it, the building's probably under construction. So it's not even a stop sign. Maybe it's a speed bump. But I don't think, other than gathering data, I think they sent us a message. It's not our place.
They did, but they also sent us a message to continue to review and report.
They sent us a message to gather data.
Well, to review and to report. We have two requirements. One is to review, and the other is to report.
Right.
And they're specific. But the problem is to change public policy in a positive way with the criteria that we have in force now. We have to review, report, and discuss with the institution before they approve and before they put a hole in the ground and start pouring money into it.
No, we don't.
No, that's not true. That's not the process.
Not going to change. You're not going to change behavior unless you have that ability to have that before they approve, the institution approves, and starts spending taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the process that's in place.
Well, and I think that if that's not the case, then I don't understand the review and report.
It's not. We're gathering data. That's all we're doing.
No, we're reviewing and reporting. Those are the two words we have to do.
After the fact.
I think the idea is that if we report to these entities that Susan mentioned, the governor's office, LBB, the two higher education committees, that since the authority of the coordinating board to approve these facilities projects, since that authority was terminated, that the cost of putting up buildings goes through the roof, figuratively, that would be an issue of some concern to the offices to which we report. So I think our role is somewhere in between the two extremes we've heard. We don't have the authority to approve projects, but we still have the responsibility of letting these critical offices know how cost efficiently systems and institutions are putting up facilities. And if we see that costs go up dramatically, I think the legislature would be concerned and might wish to take some kind of action.
Also, are the regents required to, in their LAR, to report projects that they have approved and moved forward with that do not meet standards?
Yes, they are. The institutions have to also put that in their LAR. And I don't know exactly, and I'm not sure the LBB has figured out exactly what format that's going to take or what kind of justification they're going to want to see with that, but that is a part of their LAR also.
Yes, but if I may, Mr. Chairman, you could have 50 items on that list, and priority-wise, there might be an item that number 45th or number 25th or whatever, that you think, well, they're not going to do it. They don't have to go on that priority list. They can pick up anything from down there and boom, do it just because it was on the list.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think whatever this coordinating board is going to do, it's going to be after the fact.
Right.
And the fact that legislature has taken that ability away, there's not much we can do.
There's really not.
Roll with the ball now.
And from my understanding, it just seems to me that this becomes so much more a staff function as far as gathering the information, making the information available. I would still assume that this committee would be involved in the process. I'm not real sure what happens when the full board is together, what we're doing, because it's pretty much informational only. So I think we'll need to consider what as a board we'll be doing with that information.
And a couple of the things that we're recommending is that we will be looking at trends obviously for the cost. Our buildings going up, when we look at other trends of construction maybe going down or going up, that sort of thing. So we'll be looking at that. We also want to look at maybe locations of new buildings, where they're building, if they're putting buildings in off-campus locations, and we have mapping capabilities now that maybe we could show that type of information. So there's those types of reports that we would like to be able to bring to you, and then maybe in a short format, like 2 or 3 pages with individual institution data behind it, but to provide information to put things into context for y'all and for the legislature.
And it seems to me that if we have that kind of information, or try to find information that would be of more value than what we've done in the past, that really adds value to the process, I think that would be in our best interest also. I'm sorry, David?
Susan mentioned very quickly in passing a point that I think could be the most critical. The focus has been on approval of buildings and costs, but I think from a coordination standpoint, the biggest issue could be if institution A decided to build a building 500 miles away in an area where there's 3 or 4 other institutions. And so that there's going to be something which I think institutions are going to have to work together themselves, but there's that potential for an institution, if they should so choose, to essentially locate wherever they want to in the state if their board so chooses.
Well, what about changing the process to where the regents might have the information as to whether something met requirements or not before it was approved and submitted to us?
We could try and do that. We have really, I don't know that the statute, I have to go back and reread the statute again, gives us the authority to say that you have to send the information to us before approval or not.
Well, but it might be from, if I were a regent and I'm going to be voting on whether there's a capital expenditure, I'd kind of like to know whether it made sense or not before I voted on it.
Okay.
I think that makes us relevant in that context. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, that's kind of up to the institution, is it not? They already have the standards, so if they wanted to, they could do that beforehand.
But we also would be in a position to where if they decided to go forward on that basis, we're going to report it one way or the other.
Right.
But again, that would be like us making decisions here without being fully informed about the outcome or the process or unintended consequences or whatever. So can we at least see if
we can put that
statute
in
allows us to say, hey, before the regents vote on this,
we'd like to provide this information that goes with your project to the board.
right?
We can put that in there. All of the facilities rules will go through the negotiated rulemaking process, so we can make sure that that's in the rules as we move forward.
I think that's a great idea.
So Harold is apparently making the point I apparently inartfully was trying to make earlier, that I believe the institutions would benefit and their regions would benefit if we did our review prospectively and reported to them and allowed them to make their rule. We're not going to be making rules, but I think what we need to do is go back to what our rulemaking was before and call it review making, because that's what we're going to do, is review and report. And let them, ultimately their decision is at that local or system level. I think it would behoove us to go back to the people that we're supposed to report to and ask them, is that your intent that we receive this prospectively such that we can review and report to the institution before a decision is made, before they approve, dig a hole, and pour money into it?
Is everybody happy?
And that's the point I was trying to make. So thank you, Harold. That would be my recommendation, is staff take that back to the LBB, the governor's office, and the 2 chairmen, and say, is this what you intended? Because we're happy to review and report. We understand the decision is at the local level, but people may be making decisions without our review and report. We don't think that's going to be good public policy. Is that what you intended? And then please send every institution a letter saying we're going to have a review-making process, not a rule-making process.
And we can, governmental relations will be glad to, or they'll set up a meeting with the people who added this into the bill so that we can get their intent. Make
Mayor,
sure
did
that
you
we're
have
meeting the.
And are you comfortable with the $4 million number? I know you've got to go back and get that clarified, but is that baseline?
Yeah, 4 million.
or-
4 million is what we've been doing
not much
for.
money.
No, it's not. When you're talking about a building
Not
or a
much.
construction project, that's 4 million is not a big. That's not a big
How
project.
long has the $4 million threshold been?
Those are
in place?
normally just the architect's fees.
That it?
The 4 million's been in place, I think, about 6 years now, 6 or 8 years.
Well, with just a little bit of inflation, 4 million very quickly, your workload will increase dramatically. And my thought is what we don't need is just to stack more and more projects on you.
And I appreciate that.
So I think we have to watch that number because you will end up with almost every project.
And I think that had the focus not been on removing the facilities approval process, staff probably would have recommended to you in this session that number go up.
Sure.
Because of inflation alone. I do want to make one note about the standards, and Dr. Tischer mentioned in what a report might look like. Is there times where sometimes it's understandable that the standard isn't met, and this board itself has approved projects where a standard hasn't been met. So it's important to realize that, at least on that alone, there has to be some communication so we understand why it's not met, and if at least what the reason is for it, whether you agree or not. So remember, you've approved many projects that haven't met all the standards, but after discussion about the reason for that.
Veneer?
Just a comment. I think the fact that TRBs were not restored, we probably won't see the rush
You won't.
No.
that you would have otherwise.
That's correct.
So, I don't think you'll see even half of them. So in some ways, that may play against it because in 2 years, the legislature may not feel like that, hey, there's been a rush to build a bunch of things. But I think over the long period of time, once they restore the TRBs, they're going to have to come back and say, somebody's got to monitor this thing.
And Bill corrected me, they don't report this in the LAR, they report their low degree producing in their LAR, not the facilities project. So the only report that the higher ed committees will get is from the coordinating board.
There is a report where they have to show their top priorities for over the.
It's called their master plan report, and we will continue to get that. We will give you summary information about what types of buildings are being built. So, whether it's classroom space, research space, auxiliary space, that sort of thing.
If they were doing a project that was not on their master plan, did we used to let them do that, or was that they have to be on the master plan?
They had to come and give us a reason why they wanted to build that project, and so that is one of the criteria currently.
Thanks.
Bobby. So another item that I think that we could consider would be to issue reports that talk about benchmarking best practices that would go to all the systems, all the institutions, where we could say this was particularly innovative, that the X, Y, and Z institution did this, and this is how they did this, and this is what they did, so that other institutions could benefit from innovation and best practices. So I think that would be where we could be proactive in, putting a spotlight out there to say, if you're considering doing this, you may want to consult with these folks or do it in the way that they did it that way.
And
because we can see everyone's projects, and when we see one that's particularly innovative or well done or cost efficient or meets other criteria, then that practice should be advertised to all of those institutions that we have oversight on.
And that is one of the things that the board has done in the past, where we saw their space usage efficiency numbers being way off from other institutions. And we had some institutions that recognized that by bringing and doing centralized reporting or centralized scheduling of their classes, they could become much more efficient. So we had a presentation here. So we can still do that sort of thing. Also, the facilities, Texas Facilities and TCUF, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but facilities people meet once a year, and they do provide presentations on what they're doing and best practices, things that they've found on their campuses that work. So we can kind of highlight some of those.
Do we gather information on energy efficiencies, LEED standards, anything like that?
Many of the institutions when they were submitting a project, would report and say they were trying to reach a silver or whatever level lead standard, but it was not one of the requirements.
Any other discussion on the topic?
That will be part of the negotiated rulemaking that we'll have to go through to set those standards. We have some standards that are basically collecting all the cost data, doing standard arithmetic type, calculations, and that's what the standard becomes. So as long as everybody agrees that we're going to continue to use that that same methodology and just update the numbers for the most recent years, then that wouldn't require any negotiations. But if they want to change the methodology, then we'll go through the negotiated rulemaking on some of those.
And who are we negotiating these rules with?
The institutions.
The institutions. So I agree with Chris. I think that energy efficiency and also cost of maintenance, future maintenance costs, ought to definitely be in there, because there are some ways that buildings are now being constructed that will defray a lot of expense down the road, because you build it, you buy it, but you got to rent it from the electrical company and the maintenance folks for the lifetime of the building. And Chris, you'd know more about that, but I know a little bit to know that it gets very expensive if you're not careful about how you construct these buildings.
And we have
many times the cost in maintenance and operations than the original cost of the building.
And we've had some actually come in with new chillers and that sort of stuff that will pay for themselves in a 10-year or 20-year life cycle or 10-year life cycle, where it actually will save them money over the 10-year projects. And
is it conceivable that what we would become is a resource that universities would reach out to benchmark drawing data from the state of Texas and all other similar facilities? Do they do that today, or could we become a great resource of good data that they could reach out and kind of benchmark a new facility to compare what costs should be, what efficiencies are being done, and things like that, and we become
that is somewhat how our standards are set. We look at similar buildings over on a square foot basis over a 5-year period. Okay. What has the cost been, and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how our standards are set, is by, what is it actually costing? And we saw a lot of projects that came back when construction went down. We saw a lot of projects coming back because they weren't necessarily changing how much they were spending. They were enlarging the scope of the project. They had planned to have a couple of floors that were just shell space, and so they were able to build them out at this point. So they were getting, they were doing what they should do. They were taking advantage of the down economy and the construction and doing that. So
the question, Susan, becomes, I know we use that to calculate that standard, but do we make it available in such a way that institutions could actually...
All of the information that goes into our calculations is available on the website for them to download.
In terms of other buildings?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to make sure that
all of that is available.
That.
It's all out there.
Yeah, so I like what Chris is saying, because if, let's take the instance of a residence hall. A residence hall can be a residence hall. And, if someone has already designed it and figures out how to make it modular so that I need 1,600 rooms for 3,200 students, or I need 400 for 800, and I have that ability, where can we have that as a resource to these institutions so they don't have to start from scratch? We did this in my school district. We built 8 new identical elementary schools. They were plotted differently. They looked differently, but all 8 were with one master architectural design.
We did the same thing in our school district.
Yeah. And I headed that up for our school district, and I don't know that that has broad applicability to higher ed. I don't know why it wouldn't, because there's got to be some cost efficiency to doing it that way. And not only that, the design actually improved the second and third time, because the people that built the first one talked to the people that were about to build the second one in that regard, and how to do it just a little bit better. And by the time they got done, they were doing it really, really well. Not that mistakes were made. And I just got to believe that it's the taxpayers' money. We're going to have to get the most out of it that we possibly can.
I guess my goal would be that in this area, we really become the resource, and our proactive and out front. And I know that information is available, be downloaded, but I almost want to be promoting what the staff and the coordinating board does so that we're really more relevant and more of a resource to I love what David's talking about and love what Chris is saying, but that we're really proactive about it. And I think it's going to take, from my perspective, some promotion of that to really put that in front of them so that they know that this is a resource for them.
And I will say there's one of the reports that we've been collecting and has been removed from our collection. Now they will report it directly to their regions in a format that we've designated, is the Campus Condition Index, which is deferred maintenance, but it has a little bit more. It talks about adaptive needs and that sort of thing. And we offered when we said, okay, just send the summary form to your regions, and that would be a good format. And we offered to collect the information. We've already had probably 10 of the institutions say, we're going to just go ahead and send you all of our information, and then because we offered to run the summary, we already have the programs written. It's pretty automated, and then we'll send that summary back to those institutions. So, they're already somewhat taking advantage of that, which is good.
Good. Any other discussion on this? Okay, thank you, Susan. Moving along, we will go to...
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
So staff has a clear idea of what the committee would like them to do?
I think so.
Okay.
Great discussion. Item 5D1 is review of the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to proposed amendments to Chapter 1, Subchapter A, General Provisions, Section 1.18 of Board Rules concerning rules applying to operations of education research centers. This rule will be considered for approval at the October board meeting due to the 30-day comment period, which ends October 6th. Susan is here for answer any questions.
Right. So far, we have had no comments received. We worked on these rules with TEA and with the UT Austin ERC very closely, which is why they didn't quite get posted in time, but we wanted to make sure we had all of those, any issues that might come up worked out before we posted them so we didn't have to keep reposting them. And I don't expect to get any comments at this point, but we'll see.
All right, so item 5D2 has been moved to the consent agenda. Item 5D3 is on the consent, and item 4 has been moved to the consent agenda. Agenda 5D 5 through 9 are also on the consent calendar. Item 5D10 has been withdrawn, but I have in my notes here that Dan Weaver is available for any questions as it relates to 5D10. Coming. Right.
Good morning. The Texas grant rules were revised as a reflection of SB 215, and essentially Texas grant becomes a university-only program in fiscal year 15 and forward. As we were drafting the rules, the Texas grant rules are about 22 pages long, and there's eligibility for initial students and renewal students and eligible institutions. With the change in SB 215, eligible institutions were modified to reflect the fact that they were only going to be four-year institutions going forward in health and dental. As we wrote the rules, it was under the understanding that a community college student wouldn't be able to get a Texas grant in fiscal year 2015 because they weren't at an eligible institution. As we drafted the rules and posted them for comment, one of the comments that came back was our reading of the legislation said that the eligible student could still get a Texas grant at a community college, even though the community college itself wasn't necessarily an eligible institution. They were grandfathered into the program. So as we drafted the revision to the rules to reflect the notion that once a Texas grant recipient, always a Texas grant recipient if they met the renewal requirements, it became a substantive change to the revision became a substantive change on the rule, and therefore we pulled it down because we're going to we're going to redraft the rule and then repost it again to be heard at the December committee meeting, to be heard in January. And from a timeline standpoint, we still meet the requirements for fiscal year 2015 implementation.
Yes, sir.
So, Dan, if I'm understanding what you're saying, if when this rule goes into effect, those that were already receiving Texas grant will continue to be able to receive Texas grant, but on a go-forward basis, it's just four-year universities.
It's going to essentially, over time, a community college recipient could continue to get a renewal award at a community college, provided they met the other student eligibility requirements. That will eventually phase out over time because there's time limits on eligibility. But going forward, I can only get a new award in 2015 if I'm attending a general academic or a health or dental institution.
David.
So when I read the proposed language, I did not understand one particular section, which is 22.228, item C7B. It's on page 6. I'll read it. An entering undergraduate student who entered military service not later than the first anniversary of the date of high school graduation and enrolled in an eligible institution no later than 12 months after being honorably discharged from military service. Why is there an arbitrary date of first anniversary from high school graduation before entering military service, and why is the arbitrary 12 months after being honorably discharged?
Those were in statute. That's a new provision in statute to essentially give students that go into military service right out of high school. There's a provision in the previous Texas grant rules that you had to get a Texas grant within 16 months of graduation. So if I went into the military and served for a period of time in excess of that 16-month period, I could no longer get a Texas grant. So it was disenfranchising servicemen that were coming back, service persons, as they would come back to enter into the program. So this would allow essentially a high school graduate to join the service, come back, and then they have a 12-month period then to enroll and become eligible for an initial Texas grant. So it's a benefit, if you will, for high school students that enroll in the service or that join the service to be able to get into the program when they come back.
Yeah. So you're saying that's statutory?
Yes, sir. That's new.
Yeah. Well, I would disagree with it, but it's statutory because it disenfranchises those who join the service more than 12 months after they graduate from high school, serve honorably for a period of time, and then leave the service, and they have no access to these funds. I mean, I think that the 1 year, the 12-month from high school graduation is completely arbitrary. We have students that attend a community college or a higher education institution for a year, decide that they're not ready to complete the academic rigor or the studies, then enter the service, serve honorably, come back out, and then they're not eligible for the Texas grant program.
We have a period of time we can go and look at that specifically. I don't know that we have any latitude with the point that you just made, but yeah. we have a period of time now to go and look at that, so we will do that. And when I come back in December with this particular rule, we can have the same conversation again.
Yeah. My disagreement is not the 12 months after you leave the service, because I think when you get out of the service, you ought to have a clear path that you're going to go and complete your higher education. At a four-year institution. You complete a bachelor's degree. My disagreement is on the front end saying you had to start service within 12 months of high school graduation.
Sure. No, I understand.
So, yeah,
we'll
I would
take a look at that.
Appreciate if you would.
Sure.
Any other questions for Dan? Thank you, David. Thank you, Dan. Agenda items 5D, 11 through 14 are on the consent calendar. And that brings us to agenda item 5E, which is we're going to rename brunch as opposed to lunch. And we will take a break now for that. And we'll reconvene after that.
Because I think we're posted to start the other at noon or later. So why don't we come back at 11:50 and then we can adjourn?
Perfect. We'll be back at 11:50. Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Looking for a motion. Motion by David and a second by Chris. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.